Hello, my name's Eleanor and today we're going to be revising the key theories of the child language acquisition section of the English language A-level course. The big debate is whether language is learnt nature or nurture. Nature states that it's innate and it's just something that will happen naturally once we're exposed to language, and nurture says that it's something that's imitated just like everything else. Skinner is the key man in this section of nurture. It's part of his larger theory of operant conditioning, which is quite a big thing in psychology. It says that language is learnt through imitation just like everything else, and that reinforcement through encouragement and rewards from parents, like giving the drink the child's just correctly asked for, or just praising or recording that time when they said mummy or daddy or whatever they said. That sounds really stupid. That sort of thing will encourage the child to carry on learning and feel good about themselves about learning language. There are strengths and weaknesses to Skinner's, the nurture debate. And the main strength really is that imitation really is vital in language development and acquisition. It is noticeably important. However, there are clear language development stages for every single language. Every child goes through the same kind of stages independent of what language they are learning. And that sort of seems to indicate that there may be more to it than just imitation. As well as that, children seem to have a really, really good understanding of the basics of grammar. And leading on from that, there are an infinite number of sentences. You will have said sentences that you can't remember or will never have heard someone say before. And you have just made that up. Think about all the amount of fiction and non-fiction books that we have there. Just so unique. Which, again, that seems to indicate that imitation is not the only thing as regards language acquisition. So then we get to the complete opposite side of the debate. This is led by the American linguist Chomsky. He says that that children have an innate understanding of grammar, all helped by this LAD or language acquisition device. It's a really key thing to remember in the exam, which one of these is being proved by the transcript or the writing that you've got in front of you. Anyway, Chomsky, he says that you'll just be able to learn language as soon as you come into contact with it. You'll start immediately picking it up. Again, we have some strengths and weaknesses, more strengths this time. There is over and under extension that children do, especially with grammatical rules, like the overextension of ed on the end of past tense verbs. So they'd say, for example, wented, so went. So clearly not imitating. Also, it demonstrates that there is an impressive speed of language acquisition, which really is kind of proved by the fact that if we have this LAD, then it's going to be really easy for us to pick up the language. In addition to the underextension, overextension, we don't replicate all of our parents' grammatical errors. Of course we do some, but that may be part of the dialect or wherever we live. But Chomsky doesn't really seem to take into account the interaction, which we know is just so key. There was a study that Bard and Sarks did with the child of two deaf parents. They were deaf, the child was not, and they tried to teach him minimal sign language and maximum got him to listen to the radio, watch television, yet he could only speak a bare minimum of words until he got in touch with a speech and language therapist where he could interact with someone who could listen and talk back to him. And it was clearly that interaction which made him start to be able to speak much more words, and he was soon whizzing ahead in his language acquisition. So we now have this social interaction theory, which was done by two main people. We've got Brunner and we've got Vygotsky. Brunner came up with the idea of there as a companion to the LAD, which is called a language acquisition support system. This relies on the external support of more knowledgeable others like parents and carers, a familiar environment and a familiar social routine. More knowledgeable others will reinforce the language with child-directed speech, so like speaking more slowly, highlighting keywords or just repeating keywords. We'll cover child-directed speech in another video. Conversation skills and pragmatics can also be learnt through interaction, so like what idioms mean and term taking, those sort of things. Now let's move on to Vygotsky. He was an educational psychologist, and lots of his theory is still used in education today. He came up with the idea of zone of proximal development, which you can see in this diagram here. There are things that a learner can't do, and there are things that a learner can do without help. And then there is this middle area, which is the zone of proximal development. And the more knowledgeable others that Brunner talked about can then come in with some guidance or scaffolding in this section, which enable to bridge the gap from here into here. They just help bridge the gap. So like providing some sentence starters, for example. In terms of evaluating this theory, it is really hard to know what causes the change between stages of language development, and it's also very difficult to measure the relationship between the parental input and language acquisition. Like, is there a relationship and what exactly it involves and how it contributes? However, interaction does, as we have said, play a massive part in language acquisition. So this is the strength and these are sort of weaknesses and iffy bits that we don't really know. However, I think it's a much more accurate theory. It builds on Chomsky's theory, and together I think they could be quite accurate. Now we've got the cognitive theory. This is the last theory we're going to be looking at today. It was done by a Swiss psychologist called Piaget. He says that children are active learners and they can't be taught before they're ready to learn whatever you're going to be teaching them. They use the environment and the social interactions to shape their language. And he came up with 4 stages. The sensory motor stage is it's up to 2 years. And in this stage, the child will use senses and they will classify objects, only using concrete lexis. The idea of object permanence will start to develop. This is when you understand that something exists even though it's not in your field of vision. So like the plant outside the window, which you can't see when you're looking at the wall, but when you're looking out the window you can still see it. It still exists even when you're looking at the wall, if that makes any sense. The pre-operational stage, that's 2 to the age of 7. Excuse my really dodgy writing. Language is very egocentric, so it's all centres around U. This is still the case in sensory motor, but the child will not have learned enough words to be able to make it seem egocentric. It still is. And language and motor skills develop even further. And then concrete operational is 7 to 11. These are all rough ages, rough guide. This is when logical thinking about concrete events starts to take place. And then formal operational is 11 all the way onwards. Probably ought to put an arrow here. Yeah. This is when it becomes more abstract and less concrete. There are really good videos on YouTube which show all these stages. They're actually great fun to watch because it's really funny sometimes, but they can't help it. It's all part of their cognitive development. Basically, this theory just links cognitive development with language, and these stages are all about learning language too, as well as developing cognitively. The strengths, well, it is clear that there are cognitive links between cognitive development and language acquisition. However, critics say that cognitive theorists are a bit too heavy on the fact that they are just so intertwined that there is nothing that's not connected, if that makes sense. But it is clear that some aspects of language acquisition are completely separate from cognitive development. Like some people who are really, well, they have a bad mental disability, they're still able to talk fluently. So their cognitive development is low, but their language acquisition is really, really high. So there's obviously bits that aren't the same, aren't connected. Well, that's it from me. There's all the credits. And I will see you some other time. Goodbye.